Are we ready? Like, everything is ready? We can pause the music. Oh, we have a phone. We found a phone. Is anybody missing their phone? Well, in case you are, you can reach out to Lynn. She's going to be by the reception. She's going to be around. You can come and reach for your phone. Hopefully, the owner will show up. And Lynn. And your phone.
All right.
We are ready?
Yes, we are ready. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our meetup. Wow, so cool to see so many people. It's our first event here in Amsterdam. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you to Miro for having us. We are big fans of Miro. We have been using it for all of our meetups and conferences. We call it the very introvert-friendly way of networking. Has anybody attended one of our live meetups or conferences so far? Please raise your hands. Okay, so some people already know it, and we will show you afterwards. But yeah, welcome to our meetup. Quick look at the agenda. So we will have 2 talks. We will learn about how Miro is building design systems, and then how to use surveys to define OKRs. Yeah, and then there will be some pizza, right?
Yes. Let's hope they get delivered on time.
Yes.
But we did order them, so yes, pizza at the end.
Amazing. Yeah, so I'm Sil. I'm the founder of Into Design Systems. I started this community conference some years ago because I was a freelance design systems lead and I had no fucking idea what I'm doing. So I spent all my time, reading Medium articles and watching tutorials on YouTube. And I thought, wow, there are so many smart people. Maybe we can somehow come together and learn together. Because, yeah, there was not a lot of content for small teams or design system teams of one. How many small design system teams do we have? Let's say up to 5 people. 1 to 5. Wow, so many. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so events like this is where you actually get to brainstorm about some of the struggles that you're having.
Yes, and during this online meetups, I also met my friend Thais. So we were doing a lot of meetups and conferences together. So I get to know her through one of our online meetups, and then she reached out, hey, do you want to come to Amsterdam and stream from my home?
Well, technically Haarlem. So we streamed from Haarlem, yes.
Yeah, so would you invite somebody from the internet to come to your home and stream a conference for hundreds of people? Yeah, it was a really cool experience. So yeah, we do meetups kind of worldwide. Into Design Systems became really huge. Thanks to all of you for supporting us and attending the events. Just a little brag, we did a meetup recently at Meta, London. It was really, really huge. You can watch the recording on YouTube. Also, we are here to invite you to our upcoming conference. So it's our 5th conference. Can you believe it?
Really?
Yeah, it's the 5th conference.
It still feels like the first one just yesterday.
Yeah, we were so excited that we announced the next conference during the current conference.
So that's how Sil likes to organize events, right? She just comes in like at the end of the event, like, okay, let's do the next one. Yes? Okay, next November, let's do it. Guys, everybody, next November, next conference. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
let's figure it out. And we did, and it happened, and it was awesome.
Yeah, we just love, we are a bunch of creative heroes, and we just love to hang together, organize events, to come together to learn about to learn about design systems. I'm already too much into design systems. So yeah, we got a lot of great feedback from you. So we decided to do another conference, and this time we have a massive lineup. with people like Nathan Curtis, we have Cynthia from Pinterest, we have Nate Baldwin, we have Deborah from Atlassian, Jan Six from Token Studio. How many of you do know Token Studio?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's getting there. It's getting
really
popular.
nice. So yeah, we have prepared some really cool talks for you. The cool thing about our conference is that it's like practical hands-on content. It's just not, blah, blah, but we actually want to see how people work on design systems. And we will also have Thais.
Yes, I'll be giving a talk at the conference as well. I did one talk in the very first one, I think. It was a short 20 minutes talk. It was my first attempt. And this time I'm very excited to share about the design system that I work with. My colleague is also in the room, and it's some amazing stuff that we work. It's white label, it's for automotive, basically working with TomTom. For those who are from Europe and knows, probably you used to have that GPS device in your car. Well, that's TomTom, and we are still strong, going and making new applications, making new products, and we have a design system. So I'll be giving some insights and very practical hands-on information on how we do it.
Yes, so yeah, what to expect this year. 3 days full of design system talks. You can know the latest techniques from real design system samples, introvert-friendly networking, our Miro board, and we also give you a certificate you can put in your CV. So just to have a quick look how that works. So here, for example, we have Esther showing how to set up design tokens. Like I said, we really like to see like practical demos. There's a live Q&A happening in Miro, so we always take questions. It's very introvert-friendly. You can just put a sticky note and the speakers will answer your questions and help you with your problems.
And often answer afterwards as well, not just as the talk is happening.
Yes, also answering afterwards. So last year we had Spotify coming back to our Miro board and answering all the questions. That was really cool. So yeah, there are many people joining us worldwide. So I hope to see you there as well. And we can't wait to go live and stream next month in 3 weeks. All right, so if you're interested, check out intodesignsystems.com to get a ticket. And you can also join us in Miro today for introvert-friendly networking. We will also post and...
Yeah, so if you'd like to take a picture of the QR code, you get direct access to the Miro board. There's a screen there as well. We are streaming this meetup on YouTube. And for anybody on YouTube that would also like to participate in today's meetup and post your question, you will see in the Miro board there is an area for the speaker where you can just get post-its around there. And to be honest, the way we use Miro, it's been actually quite natural. Like Sil just set up these boards from ever we started with events. And it's grown into this nice little thing, and I will walk you through it later, where you can get the area where you're coming from. You can put a pin there, and you can also post the post-its with questions, so on and so forth.
Yes, cool. So can't wait to learn from Miro how they are building design systems, and I really hope to see you at the conference. Enjoy the evening. If there are any introverts like myself, so after the talks, please don't leave. Just come talk to me. You're not alone. Okay, cool. All right, Thais, it's time for our first speaker, right?
Yes, well, let me walk people through the Miro board. You can give the microphone to our next speaker. Cool. So this is it. Wow, you already have 20 people there. Cool. Welcome. Basically, we start on this top left corner. I think we are yet to improve on how to organize this board, but also why it's so exciting to have a meetup here. In the end, it's like the main tool that we have been using it for all these events. And we like to welcome everybody online by just telling to place a comment in the board, in the map, and show where you're from, or maybe where you're at. Maybe post a fun fact about yourself. Like, for example, the fun fact that I normally share is the fact that I was a judo fighter when I was 12 years old. I did win second place in a competition, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, never went judoing anymore after that. But that's my fun fact. And we have here a little area on topics that you're interested in or challenges that you have in design systems. And this has been very useful for people to just, like put it out there. You know, these are the struggles. Maybe somebody else can relate or even come up with a solution. We have as well here just a place for you to put your avatar, your LinkedIn contacts, so we can add each other's. Or some resources. I remember in the very first meetup, we were even having a section of like your favorite design system, and material was always there on top, of course. What else? We have some jobs and projects, but of course, I think the most exciting ones we'll hear from Eddie in a little bit. And more details on our annual conference with, basically also a nice little thing for you. If you would like to win a ticket, we get a chance to by posting a picture of today's event and tagging us. It could be on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And yeah, let's get more traction. Let's get the word out there. And you get a chance to win a ticket to the conference. So, without more delays, I would like to welcome you to Eddie from Miro.
Thank you. Thank you.
1 second, I will set up for you. I just want to first talk to you.
Oh, okay.
So this is Eddie, and tell me, Eddie, what is a fun fact about yourself?
A fun fact is I like to bake. I volunteer at a bakery on Fridays. I pound dough to get my stress out. It's very helpful. Yeah.
Wow, that is a good idea. So you can volunteer at bakeries. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
It's an unhealthy way to do boxing, basically.
Let me start the presentation for you. Oh, actually, you are presenting. No, not anymore.
Okay.
All good. And let's get your presenter notes.
There's so much screens up here. Here we go.
And here we are. Can you click just a test?
Great. Yeah.
All right,
Wonderful.
you have the floor.
Thank you. Welcome to Miro, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Huge thanks to Sil and Thais for putting this together. This is our design system team here. We are a small team. There's 2 designers, 3 engineers, or 4 engineers actually. Okay, I'm gonna switch. 4 engineers, yeah, that's better. 4 engineers and 1 engineering manager. So it's quite a small team for quite a large product. And we are hiring, so there's a few positions open on the career page, and there will be more, so keep an eye out. So before we start, I want to give you a little context. We are a small team, and for a while, as most design system teams, we didn't have the support we needed, we didn't have the resources we needed, and that's changed recently, right? So that's why we're hiring for all these positions. So what I'm going to go through today is a very fuzzy, early look at what you do when you're just starting out, right? These are things that a small team can do, these are things that a large team can do, but the very early stages when you don't have all the resources, the roadmap is unclear, and you're not sure what your next steps are. So just stick with it for a while. So the first thing we did, right, is create a health check. And what this is a way to understand the confidence that people have in the design systems. We checked things like confidence to update the files, confidence in using the tokens, confidence in the documentation, confidence in using the components. And we didn't really care what components they were using. We didn't really care what tokens we were using. We wanted to make sure that they had confidence that they could use the tools without them breaking. And so we had people fill out their position here on a slider. And you see the scores aren't that bad, right? 3 out of 5, not bad. The token confidence is quite high, actually, so that's good. But we also know that people tend to be nicer in surveys, right? So I think we can drop this down a point and consider 2 out of 5, just to make our jobs a little bit more impactful when we make a change. Makes us look better. So this is the state of our system, right? We've got an unclear design language. The brand team has a design language that they use, but the product team doesn't really have the same thing, right? That doesn't really translate across. We've got a component library. Our components in Figma, however, do not match up with the code. So it's very confusing as to what's ready and what's not. Lots of libraries. We have a lot of libraries, lots of unknown libraries. We had to use Radix UI to build our foundation because we were under a time crunch. So we used the foundational library to create some core components like inputs, buttons, radios. We've got a lot of styling options because we've got a ton of legacy code. We have to support things like CSS variables less. There's a lot of hard-coded stuff, which I'll go through later. And there's still a lot of deprecated components being used in our code base, right? So this is a very messy situation, which almost 80% of people in this room have been in, right? This all looks very familiar. So how do we do this? We can't fix it all at once, right? There's a lot of steps we have to take to build a foundation that we don't have to be able to fix this stuff. We also have accessibility shortcomings. We have an internal accessibility team that every quarter does an audit. And after that audit, we create issues for everything that came up in the audit, right? And you see here the red, no, good. The red is all the tickets that are being created. And those tickets have to go to somebody, right? So some of those tickets belong to the components within the design system. Some of those tickets are hard-coded issues. So it's important to understand the scope of who's going to do these tickets and how it's going to impact everybody's team. And we've got a lot coming up, right? As if that wasn't enough, we have priorities that we need to push. We have features we need to push. We have to work on a design language. We have a redesign coming up for several parts of the product. And we've got to fix legacy issues, right? So with all this stuff compiled, you can see it adds up very quickly, right? This is the life of a design system team member, right? You're getting questions about new components. You're getting questions about how do I add this? I'm working on this right now. I need this added. What do you do, right? Because if you end up answering all these things, you're basically a support team. But if you've got to build all this stuff and make it all available, you need to be a feature team. And there's a balance between the two. All of these requests are valid. They make sense. They're part of your job, but they take up a lot of time. So we have to figure out how to focus on our own initiatives while still supporting everybody else. We also must prepare for the unknown, right? A lot of times things happen, initiatives change, roadmaps change. AI came out, changed everybody's roadmap. So if something like that happens, we have to be prepared. We have to build a system that can flip and be agile. So we're going to look to the stars. Let's imagine you live on this beautiful planet. You have deadlines, you have priorities, right? This is your team. You're focused on your own world, your own roadmap, and you forget that you need to zoom out sometimes and understand that you're part of a bigger system. There's a whole universe out there, and the context on each part plays a significant role on the whole system. And life is very contextual, right? If you talk to another system or another team, they'll have different traditions, they'll have different rituals, they'll have different ways that they solve problems. And you'll talk to them and often it'll seem like you're speaking different languages because the context is totally different. It's also not balanced, right? Inevitably, some teams will do better than others. And if they come up with a new solution to a problem, it's very costly for that team to send that solution to everybody else because it puts more weight on the team that made the discovery, right? So this isn't really scalable to have these teams have to manage this stuff by themselves. So you need a governing body, right? You need a governing body that's going to take some pressure off these planets to help disperse these resources, to help evenly allocate everything across all these different parts. And this governing body needs to not play favorites because it doesn't make sense to work on an initiative that benefits one planet when you can work on an initiative that benefits 3. All of these planets usually revolve, right? The metaphor is going in and out here, so stick with me. All of these planets generally revolve around a sun, right? This sun is the central point. This sun brings context and commonalities to these worlds. This is how we group these planets. If we zoom in a little bit on the planet, right, there's these surrounding things called moons that also are contextual to that planet. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So how are we going to craft our universe? How can we craft our universe to support these initiatives without becoming a bottleneck, like we talked about. These are our sons, right? We've got product, we've got marketing. Around product, we've got planets that supports different verticals within the product. These are the planets that we have for product, and these are the planets that we have for marketing. And this is what our system looks like all together, with the design language covering everything on top, right? This is how we connect each other. And if you look here, you can see everything's split up, right? We have a design language on the left with everything from, everything you expect in a design language: logo, fonts, iconography, illustrations. And then we have the sons, which are departments: product, marketing. Then you have the verticals, right? The canvas, enterprise, apps we put in there because it almost doesn't, it's still part of the product. And then you have feature libraries, which are the moons. And these are offshoots, right? These are the libraries that your designers aren't telling you about that exist. And so you see, as things go closer to the sun, they become more stable. They need to be more stable, right? If it's not stable, the whole thing collapses, right? But as you go further out, it's more exploratory. Things are a little bit fuzzy. But this is how you still give these designers the ability to explore, right? To move fast, because they're going to move fast with or without you. We do the same thing with our tokens, right? Where primitives cover the basis, and then we have semantic and component tokens within the theming level on the sons. And then as we're exploring new tokens, as we're figuring stuff out, we can have contextual component tokens on the moons. And all this together creates these contextual environments, right? So one of the biggest problems is I'm working on a solution, and my Discover tab, right, when I'm searching for components, it's cluttered with a bunch of components that don't apply to me. So this creates very contextual environments. So if I'm working on onboarding, I have only the components that are relevant to me. If I'm working on diagramming, the same thing. Onboarding components are not going to pollute my workspace because they're in a separate library. Okay, so this is how we're going to do this, right? This is all a concept at this point, right? We have a bunch of initiatives. How do we prioritize this stuff to get it done? We split things up into 3 tiers, right? We've got 3 major initiatives that we want to focus on to get us to where we need to be. The first is language, right? We need to speak the same language, and part of that is the design language initiative that we're going to work on. That will impact everything. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we need to make it easier to use the design system. Our adoption rate is very low, and that's because of all the technical limitations that we have. It's easier to go custom than it is through the design system. So we have got to flip that, right? And the third is adoption, right? We're not going to get anything done if people don't start implementing this stuff, right? In order to roll out this design language, we need to raise our adoption. In order to raise the adoption, we need to make the tools better. So all these 3 things are really connected, and they're the 3 things that we need to get everything done. And that health survey is going to come back now because we got some really good feedback, and I'm going to show you how we're going to put that into practice here. So, design language initiative. Our leadership team is working on crafting our updated design language to bring our product together, and the timeline is mid to late summer, right? So it's a couple months. And one of the common requests we get is, where is dark mode? I'm sure everybody in this room has gotten that request at some time, right? Yeah, where's dark mode? Requests like these, you can use to drive adoption, right? If you support dark mode, you support tokens. If you support tokens, you're almost there, right? That's a really good thing to support tokens. You can support so many things if you just have your tokens in place. And our token adoption is really low, right? So here you see, yikes. Orange is our tokens, yellow and red are hard-coded. So, yeah, sorry. It's quite high, right? And it's not going down. That's the bad thing. Even though the token adoption is going up, the hard-coded values are still also going up. So we got to figure out how to fix that. And part of that, speaking the same language, is focusing on behaviors. A huge part of consistent design language is how people talk about things, right? A dog is a dog is a dog, right? So a checkbox should always work like a checkbox. And if you have these behaviors defined, it doesn't matter if you have rogue components, if they all work the same. It's much easier to fix a component if it works the same as the original component. So focus on the experience over the component. We're okay if you want to use a rogue component for now. Just use the tokens. Use the library, the behavior library, to help us maintain this thing. And then we'll go back and fix the component. We're going to work on the structure of our libraries. We just had a reorg, as many people do. And when you have a reorg, you go into somebody else's file, you go into somebody else's house, and it takes you a while to figure out where everything is, right? So if you all name the stuff, name your things, put them in the right places consistently, then if you have to go into somebody else's house, it's going to make a little bit more sense. And team structure changes way more than product structure. So building your features or your library organization around teams is going to lead to more inconsistencies later when you have to reorg. Everybody's going to reorg at some point. So we want to make sure with all these libraries that it's easy to understand where everything lives, right? So we're coming up with a naming strategy to help us get these things consistent. So you see we use platform, which I think that's wrong. Platform's not really the word that I'm looking for. Then library and local. But you see here the structure where you see Miro product marketing, and you see product canvas, and product canvas diagramming. So it's very similar to the sun, planet, moon structure that we have. Same thing for the components, right? If there's many components, if you're searching, there's many times where you search and you'll pull in a component, a button component, that's in somebody's random library. It's not the real component, but it's another component because they're both named component, right? So if we name them with flags that say local component, diagramming component, then it's much easier to understand which is the right component to use for your context. We also needed to build trust. Part of the tools initiative was, it was really hard to use Figma. There were so many libraries. We unpublished 13 libraries that were deprecated or archived. And that stuff adds up, right? So it was important for us to increase the ease of use of Figma, because if it's hard to use, again, they're just going to go custom if they can't find what they're looking for. So we created consistent library releases. We release every Thursday morning. All of our Figma libraries are pushed Thursday morning. If you have a change that happens on Monday or Tuesday, it gets pushed out on Thursday. And the reason for this is because Wednesday is a focus day. And the last thing you want on a focus day is a broken file that will halt your work, right? So we thought, okay, we're going to release on Thursday morning, and every week you're going to know Thursday morning I update, it's going to be all good. It's not going to mess with my focus day. And Friday, if there's hotfixes needed, they'll publish the hotfixes. It also gives us time to work on stuff, right? If Wednesday's a focus day, Wednesday's also a focus day for me. And detailed release notes, this is huge. Like, this should just be a standard where you just write as much as you can in that Figma dialogue. The worst thing is to update your libraries and not know what changed. It's super frustrating. And we focused on search, right? As I said, better discovery is going to help adoption. I think a lot of people spend time making the design system files beautiful, and that's great. But early in this process, we have so much to do that time spent on making those beautiful things is going to be wasted because nobody's going to look at it, right? If your discovery is great, nobody needs to go into that file. They're just going to use the search panel and pull their stuff in. So focus on discovery before you make your files beautiful. We also aimed to create parity. There was a lot of questions around what is the truth? Where's this component? It's in Figma, but it's not in code. So we created little icons here that show us stuff that's ready, stuff that's missing, and stuff that is not in code. Source of truth, documentation is a big one. We really like how Microsoft solved this. The platform's web, they have apps. If you use this little drop down here, it switches. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have our global level of documentation, and then I select my department, and then I have my relevant tokens, my components, and my relevant resources, right? The tokens can all pull from the same block, but I need to see my relevant stuff, right? I care about my context. Code Connect, this is great. We're really excited about it. I'm sure most of you know, so I'm not going to go too in depth, but we're very excited about how this is going to help adoption. Learning sessions, we do a lot of learning sessions. We do them with people on calls. We also do them async. So we'll record a session on how an update impacted how you use a component. These are great. Sometimes people don't show up. That's the reality. But if you record it and you put it in the channel, more people are likely to watch it. So that's what we're trying to do. And the accessibility. So you remember that big, huge chart with accessibility tickets. That's a lot of work. Nobody wants to do that work because it doesn't add any value from the team's perspective, right? It doesn't get my OKRs to the place where I need them. So we're going to focus on fixing the ones that impact components. And that way, the next time the audit comes back, if you're not using components, you've got a lot of extra work on your team. If you are using components, then you don't have no work. So we're going to try to use that to our advantage of another selling point for adoption. Okay, so I feel like I'm talking super fast, but everybody's following, right? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so these are our planets. These are our solar systems that we've got here. How are we going to manage this thing? That's a lot, right? Each planet is going to have an owner, right? This way, there's somebody accountable, there's somebody to talk to, there's somebody to contact. It also gives us the opportunity to hold a meeting, right? Once every quarter, maybe more. All those owners will come together and discuss, hey, this is what's in my library. And because these libraries are all aligned, because we're following the same structure, I can look at your patterns page, you can look at my patterns page, and everything is aligned, right? It's easy to tell, oh, hey, you've got the same component I do. Great, let's move it up. Let's move it up to the platform library, right? We're talking about creating a guild. Again, all this stuff is really fuzzy because we're still putting this together now, right? But we're talking about creating a guild. What would that look like? How would we manage decision making? How would we involve stakeholders? And part of creating a guild is to understand the voice, the vote, and the veto. Who's got the power to make decisions, right? The voice is usually every user of the design system. The votes usually come from the design system team. They're the ones that drive things. They're the ones that have to make the decisions. And the vetoes are usually the stakeholders that say, actually, no, this is not what you should be working on. So, metrics. I have a strong opinion on a lot of metrics. I think a lot of metrics don't really work. They're good on paper, but in practice, they get a little bit fuzzy, right? Adoption does not always mean good design. You can easily adopt a bad pattern and spread it around your interface. And now it's everywhere. That's a problem. Detaching also leads to innovation, right? If you don't challenge your components, if you don't test things out, they never grow. So that sucks. We don't want to discourage detaching. And speed to delivery. A lot of teams use this and say, hey, it's easier to get stuff out with the design system, but do we really want to be rushed? Do we want to push features out without really solving the problem? So I don't want to push people to work faster just to hit a metric. So these are the two metrics that we're going to look at. Number of design tokens implemented. And again, we're talking about the initiatives that we have coming up, right? We've got a lot of initiatives we've got to tackle in a couple of months, right? So these are the two that we're going to use for these couple of months, and then we reassess. Percentage of design tokens implemented, because token adoption is not only good for getting to where we need to roll out the design language, right? We need token adoption to roll out the design language. Otherwise, we're going to have to go in and do everything manually. So if we get tokens in place, that's a win. But token adoption also means components are being adopted, right? If you're using a component, you're using tokens. So if we measure the tokens, we're measuring token adoption and we're measuring component adoption. We're also going to use our health survey to check our documentation health score, right? Even though 3 out of 5 isn't bad, we want to hit a score closer to 4 because we know that good adoption will result, or good documentation will result in good adoption. I think from our surveys, we found that most engineers are using our documentation, and designers aren't really using it. So if we can make it really engineering focused for now, then that should raise adoption. Again, this is not like best case scenario. This is like what we need to get stuff done, right? Ideally, documentation should cover both sides, but in this case, we've got goals to hit, so we have to cut some corners here. And then while we're doing these two, we're going to integrate things to better understand our data. We don't really know how bad the problem is. We don't know how deep it goes, right? So we've got to really understand what is the real adoption rate? How are people using our components? How many rogue components are there? We don't really know yet. So we're going to spend a quarter while we focus on these two metrics to implement better tracking for the stuff that we don't know. Okay, handoff dilemma. This is a big one. Design doesn't end in Figma, right? You're busy. Designers are busy. They're under the gun to deliver quick solutions. And you usually have to deliver something quick and dirty. I think most people in here have been, before a design system designer, they were a product designer. And when you're a product designer, you've got to hit deadlines. You've got to get stuff out. And a lot of times you push things out saying, I can't use a component because this is only really relevant for this solution, right? I'm never going to use this again, so I'm just going to push this out. But Post-it notes, right? They were originally intended to be a super strong adhesive, and then eventually became a weak adhesive that had more. They were more practical, right? They turned into something totally different. They evolved, and it's important to remember that components evolve over time. They changed. A component that was created a year ago is very different today. And this is because it was challenged. People detached it. People tested it. They said, hey, I want this to do this. It didn't seem right at the time, but that changed the component for the better. Every being is an accumulation of their experience, right? You have to give your components experience. If you deprive pushing a component, if you make something custom every time, that the component never moves forward. You deprive that component of opportunity, right? It is a rough universe out there, and we don't want to throw our components out, our creations out, to fend for themselves, right? We want to support them. We want to help them through the end process. So it's easy to lose focus. Ultimately, we're all here for the greater good, right? Zoom out a little bit and understand this is for the entire system. It's conversations like this, it's conversations you have with people to understand context that push things forward and align visions. And a huge thanks to all the conversations I've had over the past week putting together this proposal. And thanks for listening.
This is great. Thank you so much, Eddie, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate the parallel you did with the idea of universe and planets, and also that, you kind of look at components like a little puppy that we have to take care of.
You gotta take care of them.
Very cool. So we have some time for some Q&A. I first would like to offer, you're not going anywhere, mister. Would like to offer anybody here in the audience, if you would like the microphone, I come to you to ask a question. Otherwise, I do have some questions from the Miro board. So anybody wants to ask questions can raise their hands. I see one down there.
Hey, thank you.
Hi.
Lovely talk.
Thank you.
Question you had around the adoption percentages. Are you tackling that from both Figma in design or also dev as well?
Dev, mostly. I think dev, to me, is source of truth, right? This is what's real. You can design something using all components, but if you hand it off and the dev does everything custom, then it's a waste of time, right? So we're looking at dev right now as a source of truth because we need dev to be in a better place so we can roll these changes out, right? Again, the design language is coming in a couple months. If we're not ready for it, we're going to be hit with like, hey, we need to roll this out in 2 weeks, and then you're under the gun, and we don't want to be there, right? So we're going to focus on getting the dev adoption up and get people used to using a library, because I think a lot of times with situations like this where the design system team has gone through so many changes, trust is lost, and we need to build that trust. We need to make it easier to use the design system than not to use it. I think that starts with the devs.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear you for sure.
Yeah, we'll go here in front, and then I'll come back to you.
Nice talk, Eddie.
Thank you.
Question for you is, are you trying to do everything yourself, or are you going for like a contribution model where other teams can actually contribute back to the design system and accelerate things that way? Whichever answer you give, why? Like, why do it that way?
So the whole idea behind creating these external libraries is to create autonomy, right? We don't want to be the bottleneck. And I think as design system designers, we have to come face to face with the reality that designers have their own libraries they're not telling you about. They do it. So we have to find a way to make those libraries compliant with the way that we're building stuff, right? So they could build their own libraries, use the tokens, use our strategy, and then that way it's much easier to move things up to the main library, right? Yeah, so I think we want to enable people to move at different speeds, whatever speed they want to move. And then with the guild, with the meetings that we have with people, then we can align and figure out how to move that stuff into the main system. But essentially, what I'm doing is not it's not ideal, but I'm technically pushing people to go ahead, make your component, follow these rules. Maybe it's custom. You're using the tokens, great. Follow the behaviors, great. A checkbox is still going to act like a checkbox. It may not be a component yet, but when we have more time, when we have more resources, we'll go back, we'll replace it with the actual component. And there will be no difference to the user that changed. There will be, hopefully, limited bugs because the behavior fundamentally is the same. Does that answer the question? Okay. You're squinting at me. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay.
We have another question over here.
Okay.
Actually, my question was very similar about contribution, but more to product libraries and how you allow autonomy at the same time that you want also like to keep the pattern, right? And also going back to, you say something about legacy, right? That you're still like working with a lot of legacy. So how can you manage all those product libraries also to work with the engineering teams and to kind of work on this legacy by their own, kind of, and have more autonomy?
Yeah. The legacy is, everybody here has to deal with legacy. It's a part of the job. I don't think we can tackle legacy as a design system team because we're too small. And if everything comes through us, then again, we're creating the bottleneck, right? So we don't want to be the bottleneck. We want to give these teams as much autonomy as we can. So the contribution model is, and to be fair, this is like, we were creating our roadmap this morning, right? So all this stuff is conceptual at this point. It's still fuzzy, to be honest. We're still trying to figure out how this guild is going to work, how we can have enough meetings throughout the course of the quarter to be able to align and say, hey, I have this, oh, I also have this, let's merge it into the thing. I think for now, our focus is to create the guidelines on how to build it. And then if we create the guidelines on how to build it, the next step is, okay, now you've built it, now how do we get it into the system? So it's hard not to see this stuff and want to fix everything at once, but the reality is you just don't have the resources to fix everything. You've got to prioritize, and sometimes that means doing things in not the ideal way, but with a plan to bring it closer to the ideal way.
I have a question from the Miro board. So are the changes in Figma and the changes in code base released synchronously on the same day?
Good question. I would love for this to happen, but the engineering team pushed back heavily on this. I think there's a lot of logistics behind release days for code, simply because there's a lot of people working in it. There's a lot of things that are dependencies in the code. So for now, it's just Figma.
Thank you, Eddie, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
How do you make decision which part of interface should be a component, and which one is just one-time deal? Because making components is just quite an invest in time and money to make a documentation, make all the corner cases, and so on. How do you make decision?
I think if we look back at the metaphor of the planets, right? We have to think, if we're the governing body, then we have to think about which components impact the most parts of the product, right? If you look at Miro, the toolbar is a huge part of Miro. It's very, it's very contextual to the canvas, but it is at the core of Miro. So we created the icon button component, and then we created the toolbar component. And there's been discussions as to whether that belongs to the canvas team or whether that belongs to the core team. Ultimately, it's in the core library and it's too difficult to move. So that's where it's going to stay. I think it just comes down to impact. Yeah.
We do have time for one more question, and then we move on to the next presentation.
I got a question. Components can be like very complex on their own. Design tokens can be very complex on their own. How do you educate the whole team of all the designers on how to use components? How not every designer is that tech savvy. Mm-hmm. Some designers have other good stuff they can do. So how do you educate the whole team on using them?
Yeah, everybody has different literacy levels in Figma. I think when I think about building a component, I think about the structure. So I think about like the properties, in which order are the properties, like state should always be first or type should always be first. The order of the states should always be in this order. These are the kind of details that I go into. I think everybody's going to use their stuff in a different way. And people don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to have to use this in this way if I work faster in this way. So I try to focus on the things that aren't in your way, that are kind of secondary. How you use the component, it's up to you. But yeah, it depends. If everybody's using it in a different way than I built it, then I need to go back and rebuild it.
Yeah, I think that was a very nice way to wrap up everything. Thank you so much,
Thank
Eddie.
you.
It's been very nice. And by the way, this entire presentation was in Miro. They have a presentation mode, which is actually quite new to me. Very cool to see, with speakers' notes as well. So yeah, just a quick note. That's where we were having our questions on the Miro board. So for anybody online, or you guys want to come in and check later, we can also provide some more resources. And actually, Eddie, I forgot to ask, are we able to share your presentations with? Oh, great. So you also get to see the slides later on if you like. Yeah, that's always a good resource for us to keep. So for next up, we have Alex. Please come and join us. Clap, 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 clap.
Woo!
This is...
Thanks.
You can put, yeah.
I'm going to be very careful where I put that.
Water and electronics.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. This is for you. Let me just get your presentation up before we start. And one moment. Let me get your presenter notes. I'll just test here. Yeah, cool. Welcome, Alex. And yes, as we do, I would like to know a fun fact about you, Alex. Tell us.
Yeah, sure. For about 10 minutes while I lived in London, I painted murals. I was working as a bartender and I was trying to go into something a bit more creative. And yeah, painted like 3 murals for events. So.
Cool. Do they still exist?
No.
But you took pictures?
Yes.
Nice. And how big were they?
Pretty big. Probably like the length of the back wall and then like a bit more up. Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, just like with a like bucket of paint and a paintbrush. I wasn't smart. I didn't use like spray paints or rollers or anything.
Oh, that's exciting. Cool. Thank you very much, and thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. Before I start, how's the sound at the back? It's good? You can hear this. So I'm going to talk like this. This isn't too much for everyone at the front? Okay, cool. Okay, first off, thanks for having me. I'm Alex, Senior Design System Designer at Deel, and I've also been like the acting PM for about a year. Yeah, who's this? Already started my intro. So I've been working in technology and product for about 9 years, focusing on design systems for about 4 years. In that time, I've worked for Oracle, done systems at Oracle, AKQA, where I worked on Toyota and Lexus, and now at Deel, where I am currently. The recent obsession in my personal life, I don't really have any hobbies, but I'm going to start playing guitar again. But yeah, I've recently got obsessed with country music. And how can you not with album covers like this? Okay, so the team at Deel. Deel, for anyone not familiar, Deel is an HR platform. They do EOR, which is Employee of Record, which means that if you want to hire someone abroad, you can use the Deel platform to do this, and you don't have to set up an entity. So it saves a lot of time and energy for your company, and you can just get on with hiring people and growing your business. They also do payroll, and global payroll and immigration and all this stuff. So it's a lot of companies in one. And this is like a very, very small handful of people from the Amsterdam, Netherlands office. And for me personally, I work on the design system team, obviously. And here's our incredible team. We're a team of 6 in total. We've got a few other people that support us and help us out. Really, we're like 5 core members. We've got Paolo, Sadaf, Pedro, Weiji, and John, who all kind of contribute together and make this team what it is. And yeah, I'm very happy to be part of it. I forgot to give credit to Into Design Systems for having me. So thanks for having me before I get started. Thanks to Miro as well for hosting us and having us all here. And it's nice that the sun came out as well, because it's not been that sunny for the last week. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to talk about one thing that I think's kind of interesting, and that is the fact that we're basically obviously living in the data age, and I think as a result of that, it's kind of changed the way that we think and the way that we act and we do things. And what I mean by that is this kind of idea of measuring and kind of data and analytics. So for example, like the technology that we use, for example, I've recently got an Apple Watch. This gives you like 15 to 20 different data points of things that you can track in your daily life, like things that you would never really know about, things that you wouldn't think about. And suddenly you have all of this data that's available in your phone, and it kind of changes your behavior once you begin to, first off, you're like, oh, this is a cool thing. And then you're like, okay. When it changes for the worse, you begin to think like, oh, that thing that I did, that behavior that I did, maybe that wasn't so good. And it starts to kind of influence your behavior and your outcomes. So this is that the watch is one example, the phone is another example, social media. So it's kind of endless. There's all these different things that we do on a daily basis that kind of, data is being collected. We may not know about it. And sometimes it's more conscious and sometimes it's less conscious. But the kind of core point that I'm making is that really, I think the thing where this has changed us is that we're so much more aware of measuring things. Like one good example is like if you go for a run or you go for a workout at the gym. When I go to the gym, most of the people are on their phones, sitting on the machines on their phones and stuff. I don't know if they're like between workouts or between recording their workouts or whatever. But the core idea is that I think we've got really used to this idea of being able to measure everything, and sometimes if we don't measure things, it's almost like it didn't really happen. And I think that's just like a behavioral thing that's happened in the last 10 years that's kind of crept into society, and like it's just much more kind of at the forefront of our ways of thinking. And so it's like, kind of if you can't measure things, it's almost like it doesn't happen, I think is my main point. And the second point I wanted to make was, yeah, just to take a second to acknowledge like the design industry, the cutbacks and the layoffs and things that have been happening. As a result of that, like startups have always kind of been like lean and try and do like a lot of things with not a lot of people. And I think it's a normal thing from what I've seen in speaking to people. It's a normal thing in the design system space that a designer might be doing the job of a PM, for example. That's something that I've heard a lot. Just quick show of hands for anyone where that sounds familiar. If you're a designer working as a PM, okay, it's like 5, 6. Okay. Not as many as I thought, but I'll take it. So yeah, that's just like something else that's a big theme. Obviously, I've been doing that for like the previous year. It's kind of like a new area for me, and something I've experienced is that like the typical product PM isn't so like aware of the issues of a design system team. And so it's been really interesting to see that. We've had someone come and go, and it's been something that I've been really like interested in stepping into and learning more about. So I've really enjoyed that process. And that's like the bulk of what I'm going to share today is like learnings from this previous year. Okay. So super brief history of OKRs. Won't take long. Quick show of hands. Who's familiar with OKRs? I imagine pretty much everyone. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So OKRs, Objective Key Results, were founded, I believe, by Andy Grove, who is the CEO of Intel. He's widely acknowledged as the father of OKRs. He led Intel in the 80s with this approach. Intel, the chip manufacturer, they used to work in memory in the 80s, and other competitors, Japanese manufacturers, Motorola, etc., started kind of taking over this space. And basically, they started to pivot into semiconductors, and it was kind of with this approach of OKRs and like making goals really, really clear and really simple that they were able to really lead in the industry and kind of dominate in the 90s. I don't know if anyone remembers the Windows 95s that had like the Intel stickers on them. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I had one of those growing up. And it was also popularized by John Doerr, who wrote a book about them called Measure What Matters. Every time I read that, I think John Deere, but it's not, it's John Doerr. So yeah. It's a good book. It's not a great book, if I'm honest. It's one of those books where they give you the thing, and then they give you 20 examples that are all like the same thing, but with a different company. But if you are really interested in like OKRs and how all this got started, it's like this is the primer basically. So it's the one to read. Okay, so super quick example, and this is going to be like a really general example. It's not going to be specific to design systems. But say you want to win, you're part of a race car team. You want to win the Indy 500. Here are some things that you can do to like help that happen, and here's how you would break that down into like an objective key result format. So your objective is to win the race, and you break that down into 5 key results. And so I'm not going to read them all out. Actually, maybe I should. I'll read out the first 3. So it's like increase lap speed by 2%. And then test at wind tunnels 10 times, and then reduce pit stop time by 1 second. So if you begin to sort of understand how the key results work, you've got the thing that you want to do, the objective, you've got the key results, and they're broken down into kind of like things that can be measured, ideally. And another example is how this can kind of cross over into your personal life. So this is something that I've tried to implement with like varying degrees of success. I don't do it too like rigorously, but say for example you've got a savings goal. You want to buy a house or something. Good luck in Amsterdam. But say you want to buy a house. There's things that you can do. You can break these down into key results to make that more manageable and kind of more attainable. So you can reduce monthly outgoings by 15%, you know. You can try and save 500 a month, and maybe that means like reducing spending on groceries and things like this. Or you can negotiate with providers, and so you can kind of set these goals for yourself. And the interesting thing about this, in setting this talk up, is that I began to realize that key results, like when I was reading the book, it was really clear that key results should always be something that can be really easily measured, and that was always the thing, right? And that's really hard to do in design sometimes, as Eddie was saying. And when I was doing the research for this, I started to realize that you have, typically there's like a metric that you can like pin a key result to, where you say like, okay, we can time this exercise. So we timed it, we did it again, and then we launched an initiative and we reduced the time. And that's like a really, really reliable way that you can measure something and get a good result. Another popular method that's the first one. Sorry, I kind of skipped past that. So the first one is the strong one. So in the previous example, that's increasing lap speeds by 2% and reducing pit stop times by 1 second. Like that's something that you can pin to a metric, which is time, and you can improve it, and that's really, really easy to track. The other ones are kind of like more routine things where it's just like, we can't really measure this in a way that we want to, so we're just going to do it 5 times or 10 times, and we're just going to kind of knock it out and keep doing it. And so that's how the previous example, which is from the book, kind of splits down into these 2 types of key results. And then like a third type, which is probably a bit weaker, is like maybe you need to get something done by a certain date and you can't really measure it. So it's just like, oh, we're going to upgrade this library by the end of the month, something like that. So that's typically like the 3 key results that I found that kind of exist. Okay, so moving on, why talk about OKRs? Why is this important? So from what I've seen, these have become an industry standard. They're pretty widely adopted, and I think it's really normal for designers to kind of like maybe know about these things and like not have that much interest in them, or be like, oh, this is just the thing that we need to do, so we're going to do it because it's like how the company sets goals and stuff. But what was kind of like a really liberating thing for me was to start to kind of like understand that this is something that you can have input on and you can change and you can have your opinion on. And so what I've experienced is that sometimes these are set by people who are kind of in a rush, or they don't fully understand what your team does. And, you know, the design system team is like, that seems to be quite a common thing that happens. And so obviously the system team are going to know really well what they want to be doing, how they want to do it, and what the result of that is. And so I think if you can have input on your OKRs, that's like a really big thing. And something else that happens is like, on average, these goals, the best goals tend to be like 50-50. So what I mean by that is that if it's 50% kind of decided by your team, and then it's 50% coming from like the company's objectives, that's kind of like the sweet spot of like where you want to be. It shouldn't all just be one or the other. Yeah, and so what's the purpose? Like, why has this become an industry thing? The big reasons are that it gives you a really, really clear direction on where you're going. So if you've got like a ton of things going on, if you kind of have like a really busy few weeks where you get lost in support, you can kind of come back out of that and then just check the OKR plan for, you know, the quarter and say like, okay, this is what we need to get done. This is the big focus. Like, this is the thing that's going to bring the most value for this team or exposure. They're transparent to other parts of the company as well. So everyone can look at everyone else's OKRs and see who's working on what. And for a lot of teams, this is how performance, you probably know this, but this is how performance is assessed. So at the end of a quarter, they'll say like, you know, did you hit all the OKRs? How did you do? Was it successful? You know, if you don't hit all your key results, then that can often be an issue, and there'll be people, you know, they might say like, oh, what happened? Were we too ambitious in the way that we set these key results? or were the team not performing well, or did something else come up, or what's the case? So there's questions if you don't do this, and it can also be tied to performance reviews and things like that. The last thing I'll say on this slide is that they're basically kind of like a systemized way of taking to-do lists and kind of like putting that into like more of a kind of roadmap or like monthly planning, this kind of thing. So it's like kind of supercharging them and kind of connecting them to like bigger goals over like a longer time horizon. So that's why they're good for like personal goals and in your personal life as well. Okay, so super quick breakdown. Like I say, probably familiar territory, but you've got your objective, which is the overall goal. This is broken down into key results. Normally within a quarter, you'll have 3 to 5 objectives. And then within each objective, you can have like similar about 3 to 5 key results. And then as Nick Babich has pointed out, sort of Hall of Fame UX writer, he wrote an article on design OKRs, and he adds a third part of the OKR, which is an initiative. That's what he calls it. I'm calling it a task here. I'm going to call it something else in the next slide. So, like, this is a nice framework for like how to set goals, but really it's like, okay, great, but what does this translate to within our team, within our product team? So in Jira, you don't really have, the way that all teams work, you don't really have something for the objective, but you kind of pin the several key results to one objective. So you'll define this in your documentation or the source of truth for the key results. But essentially, all of your OKRs will end up being about 15 to 20 epics in Jira. And that will make up the OKRs for the quarter. And then within each epic, you have the task, which is in Jira is a ticket. So this can be like, for some tasks it's a lot, but I think the best goals have like at the start of the quarter you'll have everything defined as tickets and then organized into epics, and it's just a case of kind of like smashing through these tickets as then you can lay it out in the sprints and you can have your whole roadmap and the whole plan for everything basically. So that's always the ideal scenario, the ideal picture. I think we all know it doesn't quite work like that, but that's the goal. And yeah, I think this model kind of tends to work a lot better and be a lot more successful if it is all defined from day one. Okay, setting goals. So this is kind of like the planning stage. This usually happens in the last month of the previous quarter, when everyone's trying to work on finishing the goals for that quarter, but then you need to start setting the goals for the next one. So just a few comments on setting goals and planning. Something like terminology that exists in this area is like a stretch goal. So this is something like, we know that we like to get this done to 100% would be great, but if we could go to like 110, like, can we push the team? Can we figure out how to, maybe we can add something to our workflow to like really kind of amp this up. This works well for like, I think sales. I don't know if it's so much for design, but it's something that's often happened, or in your planning you can have like, well, these 3 are the main things that we want to do. And then adding a 4th objective can be like a stretch, like it's a nice to have kind of thing. Estimating goals, estimating time spent on goals is really, really hard. I haven't figured it out. There's definitely an art to it. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And then these are things that attract in monthly reports as well, so I won't go into that, but it's kind of like typically you'll check in with like a product manager and check the cadence of everything and see if everything's on time. When defining these, you want to be as specific as possible. And if this is something new that you haven't really done, you can do something like a mapping exercise. This is what I did. This is like one tiny part of our what we did. Basically, we kind of took all of the work that we were working on, mapped it out in in like a whiteboard mirror. And yeah, just kind of like got everything out on paper and then started to like figure out, okay, what's connected to what? How can we group these things together in a way that kind of connects? And then how can you define that as an objective, which is really, really simple. Like ideally your objective wants to be like one line that can kind of fit into a spreadsheet, something like this. So, and again, the simpler the name of the objective is, the easier it is to remember and to kind of like keep the focus and kind of keep the team motivated in like a down period, basically. Yeah, so how this breaks down into a design system example, I can't share anything super specific, but I can kind of provide a framework that we've used in the past. So in general, we kind of do like a lot of day-to-day maintenance of the system is like, could be one objective, accessibility, support features for another team, and then improving the experience. So those are your objectives. Those are like the big goals that you want to hit, the big juicy ones. And then the way that breaks down into key results, the way that we've been doing it, because we don't have a metric-based approach currently, is that we kind of break it down into like performance goals, key results. And so that's like, redesign 4 components. We've got 4 components that we know are problematic. We're going to redesign them this quarter, 1 ticket per component. And then there'll be a backlog of previous design components from the previous quarter. Dev are going to pick those up this quarter, and so on and so forth. Refactoring is always a big job. And so again, going back to that previous example of like different types of key results, these are kind of performance-based ones. The best ones are metric-based ones, so we're not quite there yet. And then for accessibility, we've got a separate roadmap for that, so we just feed goals in from there. And then supporting other features on other teams. This could be tokens or multi-brand, etc. And then we've got a whole other objective for improving the system experience. Okay, so a bit of a change up. Off OKRs now. And one thing I'll say about OKRs is like, I know it's quite a bureaucratic thing and it kind of feels like it's something that's maybe pushed on you sometimes from above, or it's just like a thing that you need to get done. I think one of the main points that I'm trying to highlight here is that it's like, it essentially is those things. It is bureaucratic, but if you can kind of embrace it and figure out that it's something that can help your team, I think like most things, it's like, it is something that was kind of like invented to like help product teams be better. Like Agile, for example, really good example. You look at the Agile manifesto and it's like, this is a really cool idea for like how to improve product design at scale. But then it kind of ends up being like, bastardized is the word. It gets copied and taken and like applied to, it just becomes the way that people do things. And then it's like, it's no longer this kind of like cool new way of doing things. It's like very much mandated. So some extra thoughts on OKRs there. Measuring design. Measuring design is really, really hard. I don't think anyone's figured it out yet. There's some things in here. I want this to be like applicable to design system teams, but also for product design teams. So that's my kind of goal, is that it kind of crosses over and kind of gets you thinking about how you can apply some of these learnings and some of these things to your team if you're on a product team. So first off, there is 2 types of data in the world. And where this gets interesting is that the data that you want is the hard data. That's the name for it. These are things like that. The example earlier where it's like seconds. Can we measure something in seconds? Can we measure something in a unit of measurement which is like widely understood, and we understand that we're trying to reduce that or increase it? So for design systems, this is adoption rates. This is component adoption rates, token adoption rates, time to complete a task. And it might be your supported tasks versus, unplanned tasks versus planned tasks. So that's support. As Eddie mentioned earlier, support's always an issue for design teams. It's something you need to do, but you don't want it to kind of let it take over the work that you should be doing. So you can measure that and learn about that. I'll come back to that later. Soft data. Soft data is an interesting one. It's kind of what I'm focusing on in this. Soft data is something that is more difficult. It's kind of more subjective. It's kind of squishy. I've heard people define it as this. It's something that's like kind of fuzzy. You can point to it, but you can't really base something on it. So in this example, you can't really have key results that are based on a metric that comes from soft data. You kind of need it to be a hard data thing. But soft data is good for feedback and for understanding things that you're doing. So I'll expand on that in a minute. How to collect soft data? Surveys. Surveys is a good way. You can speak to people. You can do other things, but the best way is surveys. Is what I'm going to talk about. There's a book about surveys which I'm recommending. It's from Caroline Jarrett, Surveys That Work. And this is like, again, the kind of like the user manual on like, if you want to get up and running with surveys. It's a little bit costly in the Netherlands. But yeah, it's a really good book to read up on surveys and kind of get started. Okay, so live example. So when I joined Deel, we had a lot of components that weren't built super well, and they were getting a lot of use cases, a lot of instances, and as a result of that, they were clogging up people's files, and files were crashing, things weren't loading, people were working on things that couldn't be saved, etc., etc. So we had this issue. So it was like, okay, we want to start improving the components and like building new components and, you know, fixing this issue. But how are we going to know that we've done it? And if we do it, like, what can we point to afterwards to say, like, okay, this was a success, we had this idea, this is how it worked out, and this was a good thing to do. So we started taking surveys and just asking people, how many times are you having this issue of your file loading speed not working? And yeah, it's like basically the green is good, and then like the purple is people that haven't been in the company that long, and then all the other colors are like errors. And so in this diagram, it's kind of about a third of like 1/3 of no problems, 1/3 errors, and then 1/3 people that haven't been in the company very long. So we measured this over 1 quarter, measured it over a second quarter after starting to change the components, and people were like registering less issues and things were improving. So it's like, okay, fantastic. Let's keep doing what we're doing. We had a big checklist, like the whole audit of the entire system, and we were just working through it. Yeah, so we managed to improve it quite a bit over 1 quarter. And then over the third quarter, it was pretty much solved. Like there was still some issues. But yeah, we were happy with this and we stopped measuring it after this. And I just added an eye because I thought it looked like a Pac-Man. Kind of like eating the problem. So it was a nice coincidence. Okay, measuring the system. So this is a big one. So this is using surveys and soft data to measure your system. So it's like we're not in a position where we could set up, where we could measure adoption. We couldn't do these things. So it's like, okay, let's use Google Forms. Let's just get something out there and start getting some feedback on these things and see like if the ideas that we have, if we're basically moving in the right direction. Because if these things come back negative, we know that we're not moving in the right direction and that we should do something different. So we started measuring these 3 things, and we measured this over 4 months. We're still doing it. But basically the alignment, the consistency between Figma and Storybook, are these 2 things aligned? Because that leads to all sorts of other issues and tech debt. How easy is it to contribute to the design system for designers? And how easy is it to search and find what you need? Those are the 3 things that we were kind of mainly concerned about in the beginning. And so we created a Google form, pretty simple. I think Eddie alluded to this earlier in what they were doing as well. But you set up a question. You want to make the question as clear as possible. And then you have a 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high. And you just send this out to your team and you beg them to answer it, basically. And so in this example, I'm just going to break this down really quickly, like how I've done this. It's not that complicated, but I think it's worth kind of exposing and like just sharing how we kind of get the score for this process. So in this example, 0 or 1 had 0 votes, 2 had 1 vote, 3 had 6 votes, and so on and so on. And so I add all of those numbers together. That gives you your final total number of votes, and then I divide that by the participants, and that gives you an average, like a score that you can use. And then, I begin to plot that out on a graph. So this is the average score for alignment between Figma and Storybook, and then you just measure this over the period of quarters, basically once a quarter. And this is how it looked for us. So we could see the things that we were doing were improving. Yeah, it's good feedback to keep doing what you're doing. And then a big leap there in the previous quarter. So yeah, Q1 score was 4. Obviously 5 is the goal, but ultimately this is something that we couldn't measure, but we could measure with like a very quick Google form that was really easy to put together and kind of get out there. We did the same for contribution. So contribution, Q2, Q3, Q4. So people are understanding more about how to contribute to the design system. And then it kind of flatlined and just went sideways, which is okay. But yeah, obviously not ideal. And then search. How easy is it to search things in component? We've got quite a big design system. There's a lot of different teams. It's kind of 5 products in one. So search was something I was concerned about because people couldn't find things. There's a lot of variance of components and so on and so forth. We increased the system a lot to help with the previous goals, but that actually meant that search got harder, and so it went down. And so we looked at this and we said, okay, what can we do to improve search? We started doing some things in the Figma file to improve it, but we also made a plugin, and then search improved again. So this was something that I found really helpful, and it's something that we are continuing to do, and we're measuring like lots of other things on the system. But yeah, so this brings me to the point of building the overview. So as I was writing this, I was thinking like, there's so many different things that you can measure in a system. It's kind of insane. And it doesn't make sense to measure everything. Obviously, you need to do what makes sense to your team. And so the exercise or like the idea that I'm sharing is that if you can kind of think of like where your system wants to be in like a year's time or 2 years' time, or like what's the ultimate goal, then you can kind of think ahead to that point, and then you can think, okay, what will I want to measure if the system is in that variation or that version of itself? And then if you can measure those things now, as you start to do them, then you get to tell the whole story of like from the beginning to that point. And that's really important because say you have an issue that you know is a problem, if you don't measure it before you start to solve it, then you'll solve it and then you start to measure it. And then you can show that someone's saying like, hey, why should we fund you? Why do you need extra people? What are you guys doing? Then you can look at this and you can say, hey, look, we're doing these things. We're looking like finding problems and like finding ways to solve them, and then we're solving them. And then if you have these charts and this kind of data, then it really helps to kind of tell the story of what you're doing, but also explain why you're doing it and help get buy-in from other stakeholders. Okay, so summary of the whole talk. OKRs can help your teams, help to make your team's goals really clear, and keep the focus of the team in hard times. They're good for accountability. They're good for transparency within the company, And ideally, there'd be a 50-50 mix of defined by the team and also like aligning with what the company needs. Something I didn't mention is like cascading OKRs, where you have like the leadership goals, and then you kind of figure out how your goals can kind of help the leadership team achieve their goals. So that's something else that's good use. If there's something you can't measure, you can use surveys. You can kind of find creative ways to get some feedback on it. It may not be something you can point to and really rely on, but that's something that's useful. You can make your surveys. One tip for surveys is like make them as easy to fill out as possible. Make the questions really, really clear, and make sure it's kind of related specifically to the issues that you want to have. And that like one question is like 5 is low and 5 is high, and then 1 is low, and then the next question is like you want to keep that high low the same, so people aren't scoring incorrectly. And then from the previous slide, make a 1-year roadmap of where you want your system to be, and then try and measure those things that you're going to have before you start doing that, and then make your changes and make the improvements. Yeah, this is one final slide about how some of those examples in the previous slide are qualitative and some of them are quantitative. Again, the qualitative is kind of soft, squishy, and the quantitative is like much harder, much clearer, like things that you can really base your key results on. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. This is great. Are you ready for some questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Cool. I really appreciate the actually teaching that you gave us on OKRs. I was one of those that feels like, oh my God, it's so bureaucratic. But it makes sense. I mean, you present it nicely. I think I'll look at them with different eyes now.
with some empathy.
So we have a question here in the Miro board. Were there use cases when you decided to measure hard data with surveys instead of going the automated tracking?
No is the quick answer. Mainly because the things that we wanted to measure, we couldn't measure. The hard data we needed would come from analytics, basically. And so they were things that we couldn't measure with a survey.
But sometimes you might choose to go the survey way, just, I don't know, to get more like a personal insight or something on the hard data?
Yeah. The thing that we found was really useful for the surveys was just for situations where you couldn't get any insight on things. And it was like, well, can we kind of sit here and do nothing, and like, you know, hopefully we'll get some budget or something to. That's the other thing is for us, like getting to a point where we could track adoption reliably was quite expensive, or it was quite complicated for our stack, so we couldn't do it in the way we wanted to. We ended up doing a rebrand in the last 6 months, which kind of gave us like a bit of a kind of thumb in the air on a windy day of like how adoption was and how token adoption was. So that was really useful. Token adoption now is really strong because of that, because there was a big company push to get tokens in the system so that we could do the rebrand and then also do dark mode, which we did. So yeah.
Cool. Do I have any questions from the audience? I think yes, we do.
Alex, thank you for a detailed presentation. And I got a question. How do you connect your OKRs to the business value of the company?
Yeah, currently we're kind of more in a situation where we've been able to define our own OKRs, which has been nice. We kind of know that like the system has like a low profile, I would say. It's kind of low on the radar. And so that's been like a lot of the company OKRs are like revenue, like let's create really, really high revenue. And that's something that I know that we can't do as a system team because we aren't going to be creating new features and new things that will drive revenue. But we know that if we make the system better and kind of increase efficiency within the company, that'll save a ton of money and doesn't create revenue, but it does save money. And so that's something that's really, really hard to measure is like how much money are we saving. But typically the time to do a task is like the best way to say like, okay, without a system, this task takes 12 hours. With the system, it takes about 5. And you can do that with a survey and surveying developers and designers. Again, it's kind of squishy, but it will give you something that you can really point to. But yeah, I think coming up for us, that's going to be something that we'll look to is like, can we do things that will support the company OKRs? Yeah.
We have a question over here.
Hi, Alex. Really nice talk. I have a question. Like, we use 1 to 5 in our surveys, and I noticed that you did the same. What's the benefit? Because I feel like a lot of the results end up being around 3, right? So do you see like a big swing, or is it hard to measure?
Is it hard to measure?
Like using a 1 to 5 scale, it feels like the swings would be less. Maybe you've been using like a 1 to 10 scale. What's the difference between the two? Why use the 1 to 5 instead of the 1 to 10?
Yeah, I think the way that I thought about it was like, I mean, if you want it to be 1 to 10, you can just like double it, which I see what you're saying. Like the swing isn't so big. It kind of tells like a better story in a way. I think if there's a bigger range where it's like we move this thing from like a 4 to an 8. But I don't know. For me, ultimately, I kind of knew that like with the file loading speed example, that was like an increase of like 53% from files that didn't have the issue. So that was kind of one way that I was thinking about it, was in percentages. And yeah, if you did like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, the percentage would be the same. So it didn't really worry too much. Yeah.
Do I have more questions? I think we'll have lots to chat about during the networking time.
Yeah, the pizza's here.
Yes. Well, we have pizza, guys. Well, thank you very much. And applause again to our presenters, Eddie and Alex. Thank you so much. We'll just wrap up over here, guys. I promise the pizza is coming. So, this is our Miro board, the end result, some participation. This time, the Meetup, we didn't really announce it to be like a hybrid model. So we had some people watching on YouTube, but actually we wanted to dedicate all of our energy to you guys that came over. And we appreciate your presence. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
But nevertheless, thank you to everybody who watched us tonight. The recording is going to be live on YouTube, so
Yes.
then it will be nice to revisit the topics that were covered today. And we would like to invite you, everybody, to come to our annual conference.
So if you want to learn more about design systems, there will be 20 hours of content. So I think you can watch from home. But I just wanted to thank Alex and Eddie for their talks, and Thais for hosting this really great job. And biggest thank you to you, because this event was booked out within 24 hours and we came here, we didn't know what to expect. So thank you so much for coming and supporting us.
Enjoy the nice sunset. It's a beautiful view. Enjoy the pizza.
And make sure to talk to us, okay?
Yes.
Also, the introverts and shy people, please don't leave and grab a pizza and go home. So we are here, okay?
We like design systems, so we're going to talk about it all night.
All night long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's put some music on.
Bye. Where's the camera?